All right, how's everyone doing? It is already week 15. I can't believe we're already in the playoffs. We're the Tripwire podcast, part of the Triple Play Fantasy family. You're now part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. We're streaming every Monday night around 8 p.m. Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, getting you ready for the next week. So we're talking week 15. So best way to support us, subscribe to the Triple Play Fantasy YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Follow us and the show on Twitter. If you can like the video, that goes a long way as well on YouTube. We appreciate it. So tonight I got two Alexes. So we got our normal part of the Tripwire podcast crew. Alex, how's it going tonight?
Not too bad. How's it going?
Good, good. And I got to give it a shout out real quick. So tell us what dessert you're enjoying right now.
The incredible salted apple caramel crumble pie from the wonderful Emily Kluge. I do apologize if I butchered yours and Dave's last name. It's actually just chowing down on a slice right before the show. Came in today. It's her first shipment, mass shipment that is, and she absolutely killed it.
Awesome, yeah. I've seen lots of pictures now popping up tonight, so they look delicious. So definitely Emily's awesome on there. So if you don't follow her and her content, definitely check her out on Twitter as well. And then our special guest tonight, he is the host of the Fresh Fantasy Podcast, a contributor for Football Guys, DeAndre Swift's #1 fan. He's TikTok famous. It's Alex Caruso at Alex Caruso on Twitter. How's it going, man?
Going good. Appreciate you guys having me. Excited to be here. Excited to talk some waiver wire stuff and especially some waiver wire strategy. I mean, especially as we get into this point of the season. I mean, I probably said we only have 3 weeks left in my own podcast that's dropping tomorrow like 100 times today. So it's pretty crazy that this season's gone by so quickly. But, that's where we're here in the waiver wire to really make some big moves that are going to make the difference between winning and losing. And I'm excited to, break that all down with you guys. So excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. No pressure to everyone out there. It's sudden death now. So hopefully you've made the playoffs, or we're recording now Monday night as Monday Night Football is about to kick off in about 10 minutes or so as we're starting. So you may need some players to win for you tonight. So you might not know if you're in the playoffs unless you watch us tomorrow. Hopefully you made the playoffs, but we want to get you ready, or maybe even have a bye week. So maybe we can get you ready for week 16 ahead of time. So we're talking players that are rostered in less than 50% of leagues. So to kick it off, as always, we're going to talk about quarterbacks. So there's actually, I think, some quality quarterbacks that are available on here. We have Tua Tagovailoa going against the Jets, so you can't ask for a better matchup. He's 39.2% roster, coming off a bye week, so you might be able to pick him up. Hopefully you got him actually on Sunday before your games ran and got him for free. We have Ben Roethlisberger. I don't know how he's still playing. He's barely standing up, but hey, he's scoring fantasy points. He has Tennessee this week at 18.4% rostered. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, just getting it done somehow. He gets a great matchup versus Atlanta, 13.9% rostered. For either of you guys, do any of those three stick out to you, or are you hoping you're able to ride with who you got?
Yeah, I think Tua's definitely someone that stands out to me. I think that he's an absolute must pick up. Going into the playoffs, because he's got 3 top 10 most points given up matchups to finish the season. Week 15, he's got the Jets, 10th most given up. In top 5 most given up over the last couple of weeks. He's got the Saints, who have given up the 5th most points in week 16, and the Saints have given up the single most points to quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks. And then in championship week, when all the money is on the line, he plays the Tennessee Titans, 3rd most points given up to QBs this season. And in 3 matchups versus teams that are green or top 10 most points given up, he's averaged 19.8 fantasy points in those games. It's only a 3-game sample size, but he's been good against those matchups, and he has 3 amazing matchups to finish the season. I think he's a must pick up, especially because you can play him every single week.
Yeah, can't disagree with anything there. But if you can't get to a Big Ben's, not a bad consolation prize, he has been a QB1 since week 8. Deontay is going to see his usual 10 to 12 targets. He can do something with them. All the dump offs to Najee. So he's going to be able to put up some points. And even against Baltimore, he still had a good game fantasy-wise. So against a weak Tennessee team, he should be able to keep that trend up.
Yeah, and not that we don't really talk about news too much on here. We try to stick it to waiver wire, but there's been a lot of news today coming about players either testing positive for COVID or close contacts for COVID. So it makes me think of Tua with his running game. I think is the 3 53-man roster running backs are currently on the COVID list. So they could still be eligible to play come game time. We don't know any of that yet. It's only Monday, but that is something to think about as you're making your waiver wire moves tomorrow, or if you have to make them tonight, of who's even playing for some of these games. We honestly, it's too early to tell in the week. Some of them, like we have Thursday night games this week. We have, let's see, Chiefs and Chargers playing Thursday night. Obviously, Keenan Allen's still on the COVID list. We're hoping he's able to play this week, but we still don't know. And then we have 2 Saturday night games, which are different. So be prepared for your roster lineups for that. We have the Raiders and Browns, and then the Patriots and Colts.
Wait,
so those are things to consider. Yeah, that starts this weekend. So things to think about as you guys are planning your waivers. So I want to move over to running backs. There's a lot on the list, I think, that you can consider. I think now's the time to kind of stash some of those, we'll call them handcuffs, if you will, especially if the starter gets hurt. Like J.D. McKissick, he's just under 50% rostered. Antonio Gibson's a little banged up. McKissick's also coming off being banged up, but he shows that he can get your points in PPR. We have Ramondre Stevenson coming off a bye. Damian Harris has an injury before the bye. We don't know if he's going to start this week, so Stevenson could be an RB1 this week for you. He's 43% rostered. Jeff Wilson Jr., he looked okay this week. Eli Mitchell, we still don't know if he's going to play this week. Dearness Johnson, didn't think we'd be talking about him, but it looks like Kareem Hunt might be out this week. And then you have Nick Chubb right ahead of him, so he might be a stash that you probably won't be able to start this week, but you might be able to use in the next week or two. Ronald Jones, again, there's nothing wrong with Leonard Fournette. He's been amazing, but if Leonard Fournette gets hurt this week, Ronald Jones could be an RB1 for you come week 16 or week 17. So if you have that roster flexibility, we have Samaje Perine, again, just covering Joe Mixon if there's an injury, and then Rashad Penny, which is really the one I wanted to focus on because he balled out this week. Now he's had a lot of injury issues. So Alex Caruso, would you trust Penny? I mean, obviously I think he's the hot pickup this week, but would you trust him in your first round matchup?
I don't know about first round matchup. I mean, again, he plays the Rams, which are one of the tougher teams against running backs. But again, I think he's a guy that's an excellent pickup, especially going forward in the playoffs. I mean, again, this is a guy that had 16 carries and a target, 138 total yards and 2 touchdowns. But the biggest important thing with that is the fact that he played 57% of the snaps, which Seahawks running backs has only hit 4 times all season. And then again, getting a season high in touches, yards, career high in touchdowns. I mean, it doesn't get more amazing than that, but I'm definitely picking him up because I think he's an okay matchup against the Bears in week 16. But the reason that I'm picking up Penny with this increasing role is because that if you can make it the championship week in week 17, he gets the Lions who have given up the 3rd most points to running backs this season. And they're a very similar defense to this Houston one that he just gashed this week. So I don't know if I'd really be trusting him, playing him into the Rams or the Bears. But if you have a roster spot and you can get him for a potential league-winning matchup, literally a league-winning matchup in week 17 against the Lions, I'm definitely going for it. I think Penny's a really, really great pickup that I think not enough people will be going for regardless of how he performed this week.
Sure. I think the biggest thing for him is he came out of the game healthy, which we have not been able to say for his whole career. That's been his biggest knock is plenty of talent and just can't stay healthy. So yeah, definitely a great point. And then Alex, how do you feel about Stevenson? I think he might actually be possibly the best pickup if Harris doesn't play.
Yeah, if Harris doesn't play, we already saw what Stevenson can do. Even when it was a split game against Buffalo, he still gashed them up, had over 70 yards. And there's really only 2 guys with a clear path to league-winning upside. Penny, like you already alluded to, Alex, and then Stevenson. He's 1 hit to Damian Harris away from being a top 7 back for the rest of the year. But right now, you need a guy who has a high floor coming in your flex and like in a deep league, especially going in the playoffs. With all the COVID coming up right now, injuries in general this late in the year. So if you can get a guy like Stevenson, I'd be pretty confident playing him as a flex, even if Damian Harris still plays.
Awesome. So I want to move over to wide receivers. I think this is one of our shallowest wide receiver waiver wire week we've had in a while. I don't know if I'm just kind of getting cynical and just trying to pick out guys that I would actually consider playing now that we're in the playoffs. But it feels pretty light. We have Russell Gage, 43.3% rostered. KJ Osborne, if you didn't realize who he was, again, he's with the Vikings. He's now their second stringer. Now that Thielen is still looking like he's injured at 26.5% rostered. We have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 16% rostered, and Amon-Ra St. Brown coming in again with another double-digit target day at 10.5% rostered. So to me, I think Russell Gage is probably the best player on this list. Maybe KJ Osborne just from a talent standpoint. But Alex Caruso, can you talk to us about Amon-Ra St. Brown? He's a rookie, but he's been on fire lately. So do you trust that production, or do you think it's a blip?
I think I trust the production if Hawkinson and Swift remain out. Like I think I'd definitely be grabbing Russell Gage and KJ Osborne over Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I think he's someone that should absolutely be picked up. I mean, he's had 12 plus targets each of the last 2 weeks, 8 plus catches in both of those weeks, and 73 plus yards both those weeks. I mean, last week against I was fading him because he was playing Denver, who's one of the toughest teams against wide receivers. And then he had 12 targets, 8 catches, 73 yards. And Dan Campbell said that Hawkinson and Swift are hopeful for next week. And usually the guys that are hopeful that they're going to play usually don't end up playing this season, as we've seen. So if they miss, I mean, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown's a really great play, but he doesn't really have an amazing schedule. When he plays Arizona Cardinals in weeks 15, 22nd most points given up. He has an awesome matchup against Atlanta in week 16, 7th most points given up. And then he plays Seattle, 26th most points given up in championship week. But if he's a guy that's getting 12 targets a game because they're shutting down Hawkinson and Swift, just off that volume alone, he's definitely worth a start. So I'm curious to see if they play Hawkinson and Swift. I think more likely, unfortunately for me as a Swift fan, they're probably going to err on the side of caution and sit those guys. And if they do, I mean, St. Brown with those targets is an absolute must pick up. So I'd definitely be stashing him on my roster. And if you don't have Swift or Hawkinson, hoping that they don't play in hopes of getting to play St. Brown this week.
Awesome. And then, Alex, I know you are our tight end guru this season. So this week we have, Hunter Henry coming off a bye week. So he's 47.3% roster. Tyler Conklin coming off a slow week, but he's been looking good overall for the season, 46.2% rostered. We've talked about him a lot. Cole Kmet, 19.8% rostered. And then Ricky Seals-Jones at 12.5% rostered. Are any of those 4 names stick out to you as someone that you would want to pick up and plug and play this week? Or is this you're just picking them up and stashing just because you want to get some depth on your roster?
I wouldn't be stashing a tight end at this point. I would be looking for a guy like St. Brown, who's a volume-dependent guy, KJ Osborne, who hasn't left the field the last few weeks, one of those running backs who has the upside. But if you need a tight end, you got to go with Ricky Seals-Jones this week. My Eagles there, the tight end slump buster, tight end score every week against the Eagles. He's Seals-Jones. He's basically a lock for 10 to 12 points per game. There's a reason the Eagles are the worst against tight ends in points per game, even with the addition of TJ Edwards in the starting lineup. That's helping on the run side of things, but not doing much in actually guarding the tight ends. With Logan Thomas out for the year, Terry McLaurin getting banged up in that game. Who's he going to – either Gibson's going to see 35 opportunities or Cam Sims is going to see 8 to 10 targets. It's just Seals-Jones. He just has that opportunity to realistically steal you a week.
I love that he's on the field almost 100% of the snaps, and he gets the Eagles twice, not just one. He doesn't just get them next week. He gets them for the championship week as well. I agree with you that he's probably the highest upside on that list and probably he is the most available on that list, but he gives you the most upside because of his matchups. So I want to talk about a Monkey Knife Fight real quick before we get to our defensive streamers. So if you guys haven't played Monkey Knife Fight yet, it's a lot of fun. First-time users sign up with code TRIPLEPLAY, and Monkey Knife Fight will match up to $100 of your first deposit, minimum deposit of $10. There's a good chance you're out of the playoffs, and we're sorry. We wish you made the playoffs, and we hope that we helped you along the way. But if you didn't make the playoffs, you can still have a lot of fun with fantasy football by playing with Monkey Knife Fight. And maybe, hey, you just want to swear off football right now because you had a bad beat this week and you missed the playoffs. I get it. They cover pretty much every sport that exists out there. You can do some kind of prop bet with Monkey Knife Fight and have fun. So try it out. Like I said, first-time users use code TRIPLEPLAY and just get some free money that way. All right, so with the DSTs, honestly, not a lot out there, but I think we have one really good one for this week and then one really good one for week 16 and 17. So the Miami Dolphins get the Jets this week. They're 45.9% rostered, so about half rostered. There's a shot you might be able to get them. I don't think you can ask for a better matchup than the Jets going into week 15. And then the Los Angeles Chargers, I would be very nervous to play them this week. Thursday night game, which sometimes is amazing for defenses, sometimes not. They get the Kansas City Chiefs. But then week 16 and week 17, they have great matchups. So I think, did you guys find anyone? I couldn't really find anyone else on the waiver that's below 50% that really had a great matchup.
No, those are definitely the two main ones that I'd be looking to pick up.
Yeah, I think some, like I saw the Eagles were like a hair over 50, a couple like right at that 50 marker. But for whatever reason, if the Eagles are available, no bias here on my end for it, but they get Washington, could be Kyle Allen this week. Then they get the Giants. Daniel Jones is seeing the next specialist, which is never good.
I don't think he's coming back this year.
So it's either Mike Lennon or Jake Fromm. And then you get Taylor Heineke or Kyle Allen to finish off the year. So there's a really good chance. Like the Eagles could be that defense of the Patriots a couple years back where they just were on fire in the playoffs and put like 10, 12, and like a 20-point game to realistically steal you your league.
Yeah, great call. So yeah, if they're available, definitely grab the Eagles as well. So we talked about a handful of players to pick up. I know it's difficult going into the playoffs to really find those guys that you trust come off the waiver wire because they're on the waiver wire for a reason. But you probably also have a lot of guys on your team that you don't trust that you really should consider dropping. So I just kind of want to go through this list. If there's anybody that you disagree with, just shout it out and we can talk about it real quick. So we'll start with QBs. I have Derek Carr at 63.6% rostered. Do either of you trust him in the playoffs?
No.
Yep. Okay. And Ryan Tannehill with the Tennessee Titans at 58.9% rostered.
We should have been a few weeks ago.
Correct. Yeah. Honestly, pretty much any quarterback we already talked about tonight, any of those three, I'd rather play over either of those. I think they just have more upside. All right. So this is probably one of the toughest ones that I put on the list. Running back James Robinson, 97.3% rostered.
He's the only one that I don't think should be dropped on the list. Like the only name that really sticks out to me. Everyone else I agree with as we'll go through the list. But the biggest reason for Robinson regardless of Urban Meyer was refusing to play him, he's got the Houston Texans who Rashad Penny just gashed for 26 fantasy points. And then he plays the Jets in week 16, semifinals week against the Jets who have given up the single most fantasy points to running backs this season and the most fantasy points to running backs the last 5 weeks. And anytime you can get a starter, I don't care who it is. I said Duke Johnson was my hidden waiver wire pickup for this week, my final pickup, because he could start for the Dolphins against the Jets. Anyone that plays the Jets is an auto play. And because Robinson has such great matchups the next 2 weeks, I don't think he's droppable. But if he had the tough matchups he's had the last 2 weeks, I'd say maybe. But right now with what he has, I just don't think he's droppable with those awesome matchups. But he's the only one on this list that really sticks out to me.
Yeah, and Urban decided, even though he didn't get the ball, he still played over 65% of the snaps this past week. So it's a trend in the right direction. But the best thing for James Robinson, Trevor Lawrence, and everyone else's fantasy value for the playoffs is to be like, you know what? Get the hell out of here, Urban. You're done. This is a joke. Get out of my team. That's the only potential saving grace.
Yeah, I don't think I could drop Robinson, but I wouldn't fault anybody for benching him going into week 15 to see what happens. And like I said, we're recording this Monday night. For all we know, Urban Meyer doesn't make it through the week, or he makes it through the season. We honestly have no idea. We're all speculating, but Robinson's play has definitely been discouraging. So that's why I put him on the list of just somebody that was, like I said, the toughest one of somebody to think about.
It's tough to drop a starting running back, especially.
This time of year, I agree. We have Mark Ingram, 52.4% roster. Now that Kamara's back, I just don't see why you would want to keep Ingram clogging your roster. I guess he's a handcuff, but to me, even if he plays now with Taysom Hill in there, I don't really see Ingram having as much value. All right.
No objections.
Then we talked about these guys the last couple of weeks, but the Denver duo wide receivers, Jerry Judy and Cortland Sutton, are just over 75% and just under 75% rostered. Big names, but
that's it.
Do you bench them or do you just drop them?
Drop them. They don't have good matchups.
Yeah, Sutton hasn't had 3 catches in each of the last 6 games. I'm good dropping them.
Cool. We're gonna keep the theme going of big names. Allen Robinson, 65.6% rostered still. We've been talking about him for it feels like 8 weeks now.
I feel like that's 30% too high. Yeah.
Cool. We got Tyler Boyd at 65.6% rostered.
Yeah. Third option at best.
Marvin, back to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So great matchups, but Marvin Jones Jr. Doesn't even feel like the number 1 wide receiver on his team at 64% rostered.
Yeah, can't do it.
All right. Kenny Gallaudet, another big name, 59.2% rostered. We've been talking about all season.
Big name, big contract, small production.
Yeah. Emmanuel Sanders, we just found out he's banged up, so he might not even play. He's at 58.8% rostered. I don't think you can trust stashing him right now. I think you just cut him. He hasn't been playing well lately. And then Noah Fant is really the only tight end I put on the list. He's 80% rostered. Honestly, I think I'd rather have any of the tight ends that we had on the screen earlier, just for upside. Noah Fant has not been performing well, and I think he's also banged up now as well.
Yep.
All right. So that's all the droppable guys. So normally we're done with the show here, but because we are in the playoffs, we haven't talked waiver wire strategy about playoffs at all. We talked about waiver wire strategy at the beginning of the season on the show, but I kind of wanted to lead you guys down some different discussions with how you handle the waiver wire for the playoffs. So for either of you, do you guys have any tips for attacking the waiver wire during playoffs? Honestly, I'd assume most people don't have fab at this point, maybe very little. So I guess, are there certain positions you guys are targeting to really bolster your roster?
I think the biggest thing with the waiver wire coming into the playoffs is one thing I do with every single roster that I have that makes the playoffs is I go through every single player and I look at their matchups and say, am I going to play this player? What scenario or what option are they on my team to the point that I'd actually put them on a roster? That's why I dropped someone as good as Jerry Judy. This is early in the season. I'd keep him and just hope for the best. But at this point, he's got two really brutal matchups, at the end. And for that reason, I wouldn't pick him up. And I drop him for someone like a Rashad Penny that has an awesome matchup in week 17. I think that's the biggest thing that people don't do enough is you drop good players sometimes because it's there's just you have to look at what priority are they in your lineup that they're going to actually end up in your lineup. I'd rather play a waiver guy with a better matchup. So I think it's constantly trying to see who's actually going to have a chance at making my playoff lineup and who's not. And for that reason, I'm willing to get rid of some pretty good players for that reason, but also grabbing the handcuffs. If you have a couple extra bench spots for that same reason of guys who won't play, I'd rather grab a handcuff for one of my running backs and just hope that, okay, we have 2 weeks left here, and I don't want to be the guy that looks like an idiot because I don't have the handcuff come week 17 if someone gets hurt. So I think grabbing a couple of the handcuffs of your biggest starting running backs if they're out there, and then dropping any guy that's not going to play in your lineup or very unlikely to for the playoffs. That's the biggest things that I would approach that I don't think people do enough.
And then Alex, for QBs, so this is for Alex Mateo. If let's say we're doing a 1 QB league, so not super flex, 1 QB, 10, 12, just a pretty standard team. I know typically we preach you'd only need one quarterback other than going into a bye week. Now that we're in the playoffs, how many do you feel comfortable? Would you roster 2 or 3 quarterbacks, or are you still sticking to one in the playoffs?
I would roster 2 just for the fact that, like Alex said, the playoffs at this point, it's all about swinging for the fences. You can do that with your matchups. So if I have a guy who has a tough matchup this week, even Justin Herbert, let's say, you're not going to bench him, but the Chiefs have been really good. But let's say you have Tua as well, who has an amazing matchup. I would keep Tua on the roster just to be like, you know what? Even if I don't play him, I don't want to drop him and then go against him this week. And then just like you said, I'm picking up high upside running backs who one injury away from being the starter and at worst having flex volume for you. And for receivers, I'm only playing 2 at this time of the year. I go running backs in the playoffs because you want that high floor and have receivers who can swing for the fences. And I'm keeping a couple on my bench, a guy like KJ Osborne who sees the field 80-90% of the time and has that home run playability.
That's great. And I think it also comes down to your roster size with your bench. Obviously, if you only have a few roster spots, you can't stash a bunch of guys. So I understand that for those people out there. But for me, I think we talked about him tonight, Tua and Jimmy Garoppolo, as vanilla as Jimmy Garoppolo is, he's got a great schedule for the playoffs. So I think those are the kind of guys that are stash them on your bench, even if you don't plan on playing them. Let's say you went into the season with Lamar Jackson, you felt really good. Well, he's now hurt. He also hasn't been playing that great lately. So it's not unreasonable to now all of a sudden rely on another player. And we don't know when injuries are going to happen. We have a lot of COVID issues right now. So I think the more you can really back up your starters, you're helping yourself out a lot. So you don't end up really kind of holding the bag come Sunday morning and you're like, crap, everyone else has already prepared. I'm not ready for this. And now there goes my starting quarterback and I have nobody left. And I got to pick up, God forbid, a Giants quarterback, whoever's starting for them, something like that. So I definitely, now's the time to, I guess I was never a Boy Scout, but always be prepared is kind of the motto for the playoffs.
Need a plan A, B, and a plan C at this point.
So we've talked a lot of offensive strategies, if you will, for the waiver, but how do you guys play, we'll call it defense, with the waiver wire now that you're in the playoffs? Because you're probably only playing against maybe 5 other teams, could be 3 other teams, depending on how big your league is.
Yeah, especially as times go down. I mean, every week I'm looking at, again, what do my roster spots have? And if I feel like I'm set at every roster spot, again, the thing I talked about and like Alex talked about as well is having guys that have upside and that can be ready. So if you have a guy that doesn't have upside or can be ready, I'm probably looking at the other guy's team that I'm playing, and I'm grabbing probably their handcuff running back or an extra defense that they could get if there's someone out there on waivers, just something that they could use. Like the same way that Alex and I were talking about, like, what can we use for our team? But I'm also grabbing people that other people use.
Yeah.
Running back, it's grabbing guys that they could use that there's potential for the same way that maybe I couldn't use, but always finding a way to just get someone that the other person can use as well, but also trying to, play defensive, grabbing other people that could be good further down the line as well.
Yeah, and it's one you don't even need to worry about keeping the guy long term. Like, let's say they have only one quarterback, and God forbid they have to roll with one of the Giants QBs as their option. I'm picking them up and then just dropping them Sunday morning. That way they can't play him. It's kind of dirty, but at the same time, it's like if you're not prepared, why should I make my chances worse?
Yeah, no, that goes up. I've heard other podcasts, Sean, the Fantasy Football Today podcast with the CBS guys. I know Adam Azer was talking about the strategy the other day. Last week, I think he picked up, I think it was 5 quarterbacks and then dropped them. He might have even held them for a little bit and then dropped them, but really just trying to keep players away from your teammates. So you said it sounds kind of dirty. Honestly, I think that's just strategy. If everyone has the same opportunity to pick up these players, I mean, It's not your fault if your league mates aren't planning ahead and looking at their roster, and you're doing more work than they are by looking at their roster and planning for them and trying to take that advantage. So at the end of the day, whether you're playing for money, whether you're just playing for fun and bragging rights, we're here to win. So do everything you can to win. As long as you're not cheating and there's no collusion, then by all means, I think everything's fair game in fantasy football.
No,
awesome. Do you guys have any last minute pointers for the waiver wire for playoffs, or I think we covered it?
I think we covered it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that was some great advice for everyone out there, especially for people that this might be your first time in the playoffs, which congratulations. Could be your 10th time, which also congratulations. But now's not the time to give up. I don't care if you're the 6th seed and you barely scraped in. You can still win it all. I've been in so many leagues where the worst record, the lowest point scorer that made it into the playoffs wins the whole thing. Because at this point, it's all about just getting lucky with those matchups, like Alex was saying, of who's got the best matchups and who stays healthy. Who doesn't get COVID this year is really what's going to come down to for the championship. So keep plugging away. Don't give up. I don't care what your matchup, what the projections say that you're going to lose by 50 points. You never know. Projections are just literally a projection. They don't mean anything. So definitely keep fighting. So Alex Caruso, thank you for joining us. Can you just remind everyone where they can find you, and feel free to plug any content you have going on?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Alex Caruso, pretty plain and simple. You can find my podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms at the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. And my biggest platform now at this point is probably TikTok. You can find me at fresh_fantasy. New videos coming out every 6 or 7 days a week. Always trying to put new content up there for people. So you can find me on any of those platforms. But feel free, just like we're talking here, just talking same waiver wires, deep stuff, everything like that on my own personal podcast. So feel free to check it out. But Zach, Alex, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a great time to get to talk shop with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, man.
And then so we'll be back again next Monday, right before Monday Night Football, 8 p.m. to get you ready for Week 16, which again still sounds crazy to me. We'll have another special guest. And then, like I said, if you don't already follow the Triple Play Fantasy Show, you don't subscribe to us, you need to. We have a lot of content coming out right now between football, basketball, and baseball. We have it all going on. We even have movie reviews out there as well. So you don't want to miss that. So just go ahead and subscribe. You can follow the show as well at the Tripwire Pod on Twitter. And with that, good luck if you haven't already locked up your matchup. And if you're watching this on Tuesday, well, then get ready for those waiver wires and good luck in the first round of the playoffs. And have a good night, guys.